Dave Corinth here at Welcome to My Shop. Recently, I released an unboxing video of a Stanley plane that I bought on eBay that had really bad pictures, and I took a gamble on it and bought it anyways. And it turned out to be this Stanley No. 4 Type 6 smooth plane made from 1888 to 1892, and it's in remarkably good condition. And I told you I was going to make a video on getting this plane tuned up, sharpened, and ready to use, and that's what we're going to do today. So let's get started. But first, I want to show you some of the tools and materials we're going to use to get this nice Stanley No. 4 looking like brand new. I've got some 80 grit sandpaper, some polypropylene that I'm going to put on the tote and the knob because these just look old and I want them to look brand new. I've got me a nice little palm sander to get all that rust off, and I got me some brand new lacquer that we're going to cover that Japanning up with, make it look brand new. But first, we're going to dip it in some vinegar. Do you really think I'm going to do that? I don't think so. Not even a chance that's going to happen. No, we're going to take our time with this one, and I want to keep it as original as possible and just get it to the point where it can be used. Sorry if I scared you there. So if I didn't lose you in that last 30 seconds, this is the plane, and here is what I'm actually going to do to it. I've thought about this for about a week, and I have decided that I don't like the paint here. That really bothers me, and I don't like it on this side either. I'm not going to do anything to the Japanning except put some paste wax on it. I'm going to lap the sole because that needs to be flat since this is going to be one that I'm going to use. I am going to take the tote and knob off carefully, and the tote especially because it has a gap under it. I don't know if you can see that, but you see how it rocks forward? And if you use this plane with that tote like that, it could eventually break, and I don't want that to happen because that tote is gorgeous. So I'm going to address that. We're not going to clean the brass up hardly at all. All we're going to do is just remove the dirt. The frog looks great. I am going to lap the frog seat. I'll show you the method I use to do that, and get the iron sharpened up. So what am I going to use to do this? Definitely not what you saw before. I'm going to use some 4/0 steel wool, a little bit of 3/0 steel wool to get some of the more aggressive stuff off. I might use this. I'm probably going to use this. I don't know for sure. We'll see how it looks once I've hit it with this. We're going to clean the whole thing down with some simple green, some WD-40, and of course, finish it all off with some good old Johnson's paste wax. So let's get started for real. And this is what the plane will look like when it's all done. And I must say it looks a lot better than it did when I took it out of that box. First, I disassembled the plane, removing as many parts as I could so they could be cleaned a lot easier. I had already disassembled this plane once before during the unboxing video, so I knew there wouldn't be any surprises. So this was pretty straightforward as far as taking a plane apart. So now the part that I'm kind of dreading, and that is, of course, is the tote and the knob. Because it doesn't look to me like that knob has ever been off. And brass is soft, and if you're not careful, you can damage that. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to spin the whole knob without a screwdriver to see if I can get it loose. So I basically just grab it like this, and looky there. Thank goodness. So now I don't have to worry about trying to get that barrel nut out of there, because that, I promise you, that barrel nut has been in there for 135, 140 years, and it is going to be a nightmare to get out. So you can see that has no damage. I don't think that's ever had a screwdriver in it, except when it was new. So fortunately, I don't have to worry about that one. Now this one I do, because I can't get this off. I can't just spin this thing off. I'm going to have to actually put a screwdriver in there and remove that rod and barrel nut. I really don't want to mar up this brass barrel nut because I think it looks great just like it is. Once I had the plane disassembled, I went ahead and took some simple green, applied it to the Japanning and the sides, and then cleaned the sides using 3/0 steel wool, making sure not to remove too much of that patina. I didn't want sandpaper on these sides as I don't think it would be appropriate for a plane in this good a condition and this old. And it turned out great. I couldn't be happier with the way these sides look. Once I douse this thing with some simple green, I'm going to use my fingers to work that simple green in all the corners. Like I said, I don't want to use sandpaper, so first I'm going to try this 3/0 steel wool just to see what the result looks like, if it's something I can live with. Now you're starting to see some metal, some raw metal. So that's a good sign. I think this is going to work just with the 3/0. I'm not going to have to use any sandpaper on it. Yep, that's what I'm after right there. So no sandpaper had to be used, basically just some elbow grease and some 3/0 steel wool, and that's what we want to see right there. So now I'm going to hit the other side, and hopefully I get the same result. I am happy with that. I kind of already cleaned this body once with my fingers, but I want to go over with this nylon brush to get in those corners on the heavier stuff. This will break loose a lot of those big chunks that I can't get with my fingers. So there is the body, pretty much cleaned up. I've got all the grit and dirt and grime, and as far as I want to take it. It's not perfect, but I don't want to go any further. Once the body was cleaned, I then worked on the frog and the brass adjustment knob, making sure not to remove too much patina off of that brass adjusting knob. A really bright, shiny adjustment knob on this plane would not look right. So just like the body, I decided to clean the frog using just my fingers to start, rubbing it in there, not too hard, but just enough to break some of that dirt loose. And where I can't get in there with my fingers, I'm going to use this nylon brush to break the bigger stuff loose, especially around that studded rod and, of course, the adjustment yoke. This little disc spins. It's supposed to do that. So if you get one and that disc doesn't spin, then it should. You can put some a little bit of penetrating oil or some WD-40 or some 3-in-1, and then you can kind of work that thing around and it'll start to spin, because that is supposed to spin. It's actually a rotating disc. And where the iron seats to the frog right now, I'm just going to clean it. I'll worry about flattening if it needs it at a later time. And I'm going to use the same 3/0 steel wool on the lateral lever. I really want to get that cleaned up because I know there's 3 patent dates that I want to see. Okay, there's that. That looks good to me. And speaking of those 3 patent dates, the first one is Joseph Neech, and that is actually the lateral itself. The other 2 patents were granted to Justice A. Trout, and the 1884 patent was for fulcrum pins in the body to be used with the lateral. And the 1888 patent is for that rotating disc that I just showed you. And to clean that brass knob, I'm just going to use some WD-40 and my fingers just to knock the dirt off, as I don't want to lose that patina. I like to use a toothpick to clean out that little gullet. I guess that's what you call it. That area between the knurling and the next knurling. I guess that's called a gullet or whatever you want to call it. But all I do is take a toothpick and go in there and clean that out. So here's the knob, the brass knob, all cleaned up as far as I'm going to take it at least. And you can see those gullets are now a lot cleaner. They don't have all that grime and dead skin or whatever you want to call it in there. And it even has some of its original luster on the brass face where those patent dates are located. So I like that. So I'm happy with that. So we'll go ahead and put that on the frog right here. And since this one has right-hand threads, it threads on just like a regular nut. It righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. And all you got to do is lift up that yoke and spin the brass adjuster knob on there. Once I had the body and the frog cleaned, I went ahead and lapped the frog seat using lapping compound. And it turned out that this frog didn't need much, as it was a really good seat to begin with. So now that I have the frog cleaned to the point that I want it cleaned, and of course the body, I want to go ahead and get these 2 to sit on there perfect. And I'm going to check it first just by taking 2 fingers. And I'm going to see if there's any rocking. And not that way. All right, put your fingers where the frog screws would normally go, and then just kind of move it around. Oh, there's none on this. I mean, that feels really good, actually. But you know what? We're going to go ahead and check it just to be sure. And what I use is valve grinding compound. You can buy this at any auto parts store. I actually got this at, I believe, AutoZone. Of course, when I tuned up that Type 11 number 5, I said I got it at Zielinski Auto Parts, and not one of you commented on that. I'm really disappointed because Zielinski Auto Parts is the auto store from Tommy Boy, and it doesn't even exist, with Dan Aykroyd as the king of auto parts. But no one even picked up on that, or if you did, you didn't comment. So I was hoping to get a couple comments out of that. But anyways, we're going to take this valve grinding compound that I got from AutoZone, and we're going to put a little dab on the seat, and then we're just going to rub this back and forth for a little bit just to see where it's at. Right now, honestly, I don't think it needs much, but we're going to do it anyways because I'm here and I have it. Now, before I get too far, I do want to say this. You don't want to get this in the threads here. Put the frog on there now. And what I like to do is take the frog screws on these pre-type 9 planes and then actually put the screw in there without the washer. All I'm trying to do is just protect those threads. And then I'll put this one in there. Of course, sometimes these are not the funnest things to put in. So now that I've got it, you can see it's loose. And all I'm going to do is take this and then just start rocking it back and forth, keeping it flat. And at first, it'll be really crunchy. And the longer you go, the smoother it gets. And when it starts to feel really smooth, then you can stop. And yes, this is going to take a few minutes, so bear with me. So let's see where we're at. So this is what it looks like when you're done. You can see where that compound rubbed pretty good on there. I'm going to wipe that off and that'll get a better look on it. And you can see on the frog seat itself, where you can see it rubbed pretty much everywhere. So let's check it out and get that compound off there. You don't want to rub that compound into one of them screw holes either. So this is after I sprayed some WD-40 on it, and you can see it is right in the center and making good contact on both sides. So we're in good shape. So now the frog will seat to the body with no rocking whatsoever, which will definitely improve the performance of this plane. Next, I turned my attention to the tote and the knob, and I didn't do much to them. All I did was clean them. They were in excellent condition. The bottom of the tote needed a little bit of work to get it more flat, but other than that, this tote and knob are just like they were whenever they came on the plane. I didn't even bother with taking paint off of them. There's a few paint specks here and there, and I like the way that looks. Now I want to go ahead and turn my attention to the tote and the knob. And the knob, I'm not going to remove that barrel nut because good luck with that. But I do want to remove the dust off the bottom, and all I'm going to do is hit this with some wax, and that's it, and a cotton cloth. I'm not going to get carried away with like trying to remove paint. I don't really care. This one does have a little nick right there, but that nick has been there a long time, and I'm not going to do anything to it. There doesn't appear to be any checks in that base. That base is absolutely flawless with that beautiful bead. The tote, I can, just by doing this, when I set it down earlier, I noticed it rocked back and forth because I think that might be what's causing the problem on the plane to begin with. Other than that, we're just going to do the same thing, hit it with some wax and walk away because I do not want to remove any of that original finish. That is beautiful. Let's get this addressed first, and then we'll see where we're at. So this is a piece of 120 grit. All I'm going to do is run this tote back and forth and see if I can find out where that hump is at. It looks like it's right there. So we'll just run that back and forth until that goes away. That is a lot better. So now I want to clean this with some paste wax, and I've put some on this rag, and this is my dirty rag. I use this to put paste wax on everything. And I'm just going to put a nice liberal coat of it on there. I'm not worried about removing paint chips. All I'm doing is just kind of cleaning it a little bit. I'm not going to get carried away. Ooh, that top's becoming a lot cleaner. Okay, we're getting somewhere now. And one of the coolest things whenever I first got this plane out of the box and started to do a little bit of a inspection was I noticed that this spot was really smooth. And that's from someone holding it with their thumb right there for years. I mean, that doesn't happen from one or two uses. That takes quite a bit of time to do. So I'm going to let this sit for a minute with that wax on there, and then we're going to focus on the knob. And all I want to do is just get this dust and dirt off the bottom. I'm not worried about paint chips. So a little bit of paste wax on there, and then just start to rub it in. Like that. That's much better. Yeah, still some right here. But, you know, it may just be that way. I may not be able to get it all the way off. We'll let them two sit for about 10 minutes, and then we'll polish them up. These have had a chance to dry, and I'm going to go ahead and just wipe that wax off there. See how much better these look. In case you're wondering, hands get dirty cleaning planes. Once in a while, I'll put some of those latex gloves on or those neoprene gloves, but not this. I kind of like to get my hands dirty once in a while. Okay, that one looks a lot better. And we'll polish this one up a little bit. I'm not really trying to get these looking like brand new because, I mean, they're 140 years old. They're going to have nicks and dings and pieces of paint on them. I ain't worried about that. Okay, that's good enough. I'm happy with that. And this is the only time I used the wire wheel on the entire plane. And all I did, I just wanted to get those threads on some of the screws cleaned up. And that's it. I want to go ahead and put the tote and the knob on the plane. So I have the barrel nut here in place. And let's see if we can get that same little lift to go away. Hopefully it does. By lapping the bottom of that tote, should have fixed it. Did not. So let's try another little trick. This one you're probably going to cringe on, but we're going to do it anyways. So sometimes this rod is not in the correct place. It sits back too far. If it sits back too far, the tote will then, when it seats, the tote will do this. If it's too far forward, the tote will lift up. So there's a happy medium, and I've often found these rods bent from the factory where the worker at Stanley actually bent this rod to make sure that tote fit perfect. On number 5s, it's not as bad, but on these number 4s and 3s, it's a lot worse because you only have the one screw that supports or that holds that tote down. So what you do is you set it in there good and tight like it is, and then you slightly bend it. Don't get carried away because you don't want to break this. But you just kind of pull on it forward just a little bit, about like that. So now when I put this tote on, hopefully it should lean it forward just a little bit. Let's see how it does this time. There, now engage. You see when it engaged, it leaned it forward. So now when I tighten that down, it should seat it properly. And there it goes. Much better. That is what we're after right there. So now we don't have that gap at the bottom. Let's look at the other side. Oh yeah, we're in good shape. So the knob, simple. I just basically set it over the raised boss. If it'll engage, there it goes. And then just spin until it catches. And then we put it like it was. So there's our knob. Now we can put the frog on. And I'm not getting the frog perfect right now. I'm just getting it close. I'll adjust that better once I get the iron sharpened. But for now, I just want to get it put back on there. Less chance of me losing something or breaking something when it's all assembled. Once I had the tote knob on the plane, then I turned my attention to the lever cap. And I didn't want to remove too much patina and make this lever cap look like new. So I used 3/0 steel wool again with some simple green, and then applied a coat of Johnson's paste wax to it. The iron and chip breaker were next. Both of them got wet dry 400 grit sandpaper with some simple green. Then went over with a 4/0 steel wool to polish them up. Now the chip breaker and the iron were a little bit crustier than the lever cap and the sides. So I decided to go ahead and use some 400 wet dry sandpaper with some simple green as the lubricant. And just try to get the crustiness off of it. That way it's a little smoother when you're touching it. And then once I got done sanding it, I went ahead and took some 4/0 steel wool just to polish it up and give it a little bit of shine. And now you can really see that 1867 patent. Just like the chip breaker, the iron got the same treatment, that 400 grit wet dry sandpaper just to remove that grit. And I really wanted to be able to see that beautiful J logo, and it's clear as a bell. As far as cleaning goes, the plane is done. The only thing left to do is the tuning part. And I think this looks great. It definitely still looks old, and I'm happy with the results so far. The last person to grind this iron didn't grind it square, and it was off quite a bit, 1/16 of an inch in 2 inches, which is too much for a plane. So I went ahead and reground the primary bevel at 25 degrees. And if you'll notice, there's kind of a dark streak at the very edge of the iron, and that is not from me grinding and getting it too hot. That was there before I started to grind, and it ended up being just a little bit of dirt. And when I grind these, I'm constantly checking it for heat. You don't want to get these too hot. And now that grind is much better. They don't have to be perfectly square, but it was way too far out before. I then lapped the back of the iron to make sure that it was dead flat, and then did the same thing to the chip breaker to ensure that the chip breaker would seat to the iron with no movement. And then lapped the leading edge of the lever cap that makes contact with the chip breaker, so the lever cap, chip breaker, and iron all seat well, ensuring there's less chatter. The back of this iron didn't look too bad. You could tell that someone had really worked on it before, so all I did was hit it with this 320 grit diamond stone. I first hit it with 320, then 600, and then hit it with 1,000. I then hit it with a 3,000 grit water stone. And this will make the back of that iron look basically like a mirror. Next, I decided I wanted to round the corners over since this is going to be a smooth plane, and relieving those corners will prevent plane tracks. And all you have to do to the chip breaker is lap that leading edge, and to do this I used my 600 grit stone. The chip breaker is pretty soft, so it wasn't difficult to do. I like to roll the top edge of that chip breaker. It kind of smooths it out, and this lets the shavings of the chips roll over the top of that chip breaker a lot better, and it's less likely to get clogged. And once you're done rolling it over, you want to remove that burr just with 1 or 2 passes over a nice fine stone. And you also want to lap where the lever cap makes contact with the chip breaker. And I use the same 600 grit water stone, and it doesn't take long because someone had already done this years ago. The iron was then honed first with a 3,000 grit water stone and then with a 10,000 grit water stone, with the edges relieved to prevent plane tracks while smoothing. And you can see here, these are those pesky little plane tracks. On smoothing planes, I'll put a 5-degree micro bevel on it, in addition to that 25-degree standard grind. And at this stage, I knew that my water stones needed to be flattened, but I don't mind that when I'm honing a smooth plane, because having that hollow in my water stones actually gives me a slight camber on this iron. And when I flip it over on the 10,000 grit side, I'll actually apply a little bit of pressure to each edge just to ensure that I'm getting a slight camber. This shows the amount of hollow on my water stones. I have a straight edge on top, and I can't even fit a 2/1000 feeler gauge under it. But I can slide a 1.5 feeler gauge under there, which gives you the idea of how much camber this iron will have. Next, I took my attention to the sole. And the sole, I didn't know how bad it was going to be and didn't even know if there were cracks in it. But it turned out this only took me about 4 minutes to lap this sole. It was in excellent condition, which makes me believe that whoever had this plane before took great care of it and made sure this plane was always in tip-top condition. Okay, so maybe not the last owner. As you can see, it's got some paint and some rust on it. But whoever had it years ago took care of this plane, and it did not take long to lap it. And I started lapping this with 120 grit dry sandpaper. And like I said, this sole did not take very long to lap, a little over 4 minutes. And to finish it up, I run the sole over some 220 grit wet dry sandpaper with some WD-40. And before I put this iron in, I want to make sure that chip breaker seats to that iron properly. And what I do is I set the chip breaker on there and I look for light between the two. If there's no light, it's good to go. To see if this plane is tuned up like I want to go ahead and test it out at this stage. Sometimes once you tune one and you give it a try, it doesn't work like you want, and you have to go back in and tweak a few things here and there. So don't be surprised if I tell you that I have to go back and tweak a few things. It's not uncommon. As a matter of fact, it's probably the norm. And we'll see if this plane is ready to go on that till so it can be used whenever I need it. And I really like the results that you get from a well-tuned smooth plane. The color looks better, the wood feels better, and to be honest with you, it's just a lot more enjoyable. Well, I'm certainly happy with the way this plane turned out. I've got to do some more tweaking to it, but nothing major. It did an excellent job of planing this old pine board down, and it's going to be one of my go-to smoothers in the future. Comment, like, and subscribe, and I'll make more. Thank you for watching, and keep an eye out for old planes like this on eBay. So now the question is, which plane do I take out to put this one in its place? This one I'm not going to get rid of. This is my Craftsman Jubilee, and I really like it. This is my other Craftsman that I really like. It's got those turned sides. This one is the Sargent VBM that well, it's not a VBM, but I haven't tuned it yet. So I'm going to say probably this one because I know I'm definitely not moving that Lee Nielsen. I love that plane. So sorry, Mr. Sargent. Let's put Mr. Stanley right there. Okay, looks like I might need to build a new till because this one's getting full. Might have to do that. So I made this video last night and I was pretty happy with it, except for the very ending. Whenever I decided to test this plane out on a piece of pine. And I'm sure if you don't comment on it, you're going to be thinking that any plane can smooth pine. That's like the easiest wood of all to smooth. And I don't work with pine a lot because it's not native to where I'm at. Now it grows here now, but not whenever my ancestors came here. I typically work with black walnut, cherry, cypress, oak, a little bit of maple, not much. I just want to see how well this plane performs in something a little harder than white pine. Walnut's not extremely hard, but it definitely is harder than white pine. And I use a lot of black walnut. And this piece of walnut has one of them little whoop-de-doos at the end that goes up and down. And if you've ever smoothed any kind of wood, and it has one of those up and down spots, you know what I'm talking about. It can be really frustrating. So I want to see how well it performs because I'm not going to use this plane on rosewood or some kind of babinga or something like that. The only time I ever use rosewood or babinga or some oddball hardwood tropical dense lumber is when I'm making totes and knobs, or I'm making tool handles or chip breaker screwdrivers. That's about it. So I want to test this plane out on this piece of black walnut and see how it does. And no, I did not go ahead and try it first just to make sure. You're going to see it as I try it out for the first time, and we'll see how it does just in this corner up here and see if we get any tear out. I do have the plane set up with a pretty tight mouth. It's about a 32nd of an inch. I could make it tighter, but I want to see how well it does at a 32nd. And if it doesn't do well, I'll adjust it and tighten it a little bit more, because the closer you can get that iron to the front of that mouth, the better it's going to perform and the less chance you're going to have of getting tear out. And right now I'm about a 32nd of an inch. So let's give it a shot and see how well it works. A little more. Oh, too deep there. Yeah, we need to back that off. There we go. Okay, not bad. Let's see how it looks. I think I can live with that. I could tighten that mouth up a little bit, but I think I'm going to leave it like it is for right now, because that's not bad.